pathway into working with the Eagles is very non-traditional because I did not play basketball at a high level or even in high school. You know, I'm not a good basketball player. That's just a fact. And you know, and my kids don't play. Like a lot of guys that get involved in coaching either play it themselves, so they love the game and they want to get back, or they have kids that play, so they coach because their kids play. That neither one of those things is the case for me. Although I've always loved basketball, my involvement was mostly is from my background as a social worker and in education. I worked with youth, and I didn't like that part. Mm-hmm. Enjoyed that quite a bit, and I understood the importance of youth being connected to activities outside of school as a way to kind of expand the world. So my introduction to basketball was really through that lens, not from the game itself, but from recognizing that extracurriculars and basketball in particular, which I liked, was a pathway to kind of expand kids' worlds. That's how I kind of got involved as a volunteer coach in my early years, but I wasn't even a very good coach. Like I coached CYC and Matthews Dickey, and I mean, I did my best. I wasn't great. So how does someone like me end up with one of the best national travel teams in the country, which the Eagles are? It's a journey. We have our ups and downs, but it is considered one of the. It's an iconic club. It's been around from the early days. It just is. And it was an accident. If you want to hear the story, I can tell you quickly. But I was working in a school district, and I was working with a family, and the mom said, "Hey, I have a son who's I think pretty good at basketball, and I don't know anything about it. Can you help him find a team?" Mm-hmm. I said, "Well, I know about this team called the Eagles because I've read about them, and I think I have a friend of a friend that knows Rich Gray. Rich Gray was the director and founder." I said, "Let me call this guy. He knows Rich." And Rich said, "Yeah." I called Rich. He said, "We're having tryouts. Bring the kid. Love to have him come out." Mm-hmm. Very, very polite. So I went to pick up this kid who I did not know. His name is Gary Buchanan. You know him?
Yeah.
Right. So I didn't know Gary. I kind of knew his mom. I gave him a ride. I didn't know he could play. I go to the gym. There's 100 kids there. I wasn't even really paying attention. Mm-hmm. And he makes the team. Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, I got to drive this kid back and forth now because he made the team because mom didn't have a car. And in doing so, Rich Gray just asked me to volunteer because they were, they're shorthanded. It was a small, back then, it was like 1995. The club had only been around for 7 years in retrospect. And they were just shorthanded. They just needed some extra people. I said, sure, I can volunteer. And I sat on the bench for a couple of years, but I recognized early on that my role to help the club was not on the bench. Mm-hmm. Yelling out plays, that wasn't my calling. That's not how I was going to help the club. And so I switched into more of a administrative support role to kind of, because as the club grew, the administrative demands grew exponentially, especially when we partnered with Nike. So that's what I've been doing ever since. And of course, you know what happened to Gary. So he makes the team, and now he's in the Villanova Hall of Fame.
Right. No, one of the all-time greats at Villanova. And so just real quick, just so Harold Bailey, Coach Gray, Coach Goldman, so those were like the founders. And even when I got introduced to it, I didn't know that it was in such an early stage,
It really was. And it seemed like it was an advanced club, and in some ways it was. But the first year I was involved in 95. So the club had been around since 88. And you're right. It started out, and Mr. G can tell the story more accurately than me because I wasn't around back then. But it started as sort of like one team. Harold Bailey was going to put the money for this team to go to nationals if they qualified. So he has Rich, I think Bill Vollmer, Mr. G, and someone else to kind of help put this team together. They were like, I want to say 1,700, 1,900, something like that. Mm-hmm. And they qualified. But then Harold didn't have the money for real. Like, oh, I don't think you're going to make it. So they had to raise money. And they went all the way to, I think it was Yakima, Washington, some really obscure place. But that's really how it started. And then for the first few years, they just did 17U. They did multiple 17U teams. I mean, Mr. G you should interview him too. He'll carve out some time for that story though. But but he'll give you the early years super accurate. But when I came in 95, they were down to one or two teams in each age group, 17, 16, and 15. But we did not have a Nike contract. We still had to raise our own money. Mm-hmm. Coaches were digging deep in their pockets. We were carpooling the tournaments. Mm-hmm. We were selling popcorn and candy. We were doing all those kind of traditional small athletic club events. And that was sort of on the cusp of really changing because we had some pretty good players. That first real break, we had good players all the way through, but our breakout team, I think, for the club was in 1990. Erwin Claggett and Scott Highmark and Julian Johnson and that group made a big splash. They finished third in nationals, beat Chris Webber's team. I mean, they had a big splash. And all of a sudden, wow, St. Louis kids can play. And I think our initial, I don't know, our value to the community is that we were able to give local kids a national platform to play, which opened up their world, thinking, you know what, I can do this. It also let people know that St. Louis had some players. Right. The credit goes to the kids always, but giving them the opportunity to perform was our gift to them, and I think why the club was successful in the early years.
Right, because I think that early 1990 team, it was the birth of even just like our generation, because a lot of those great players that, that came from you guys' program ended up being like the next good crop of like the St. Louis Billikens, the Missouri Tigers. So right. You got a next generation of kids that's watching games, like seeing guys. And so all of a sudden, again, these guys are larger than life to us. And the kids that wanted to start doing their homework on how to get to that point of being at that level, all right, we start doing the research. Okay, these guys play for the Eagles. Well, I need to try out to try to make the Eagles team. Did you start seeing a lot more of attention going towards people wanting to go in that direction during that time? Or was it still more of just having a tryout, getting the best kids, and then seeing what happened from there?
Well, so when I came in 95, it was still having the tryout, seeing who came. I mean, when I came in 95, it was not a 12-month job or volunteer experience, which it is now. Right now, it's 12 months, year round. It's much different, and I can talk about that if you like. But it's so different. But in 95, we would meet in the off season and talk about kids we'd seen. But we basically had open tryouts and would largely pick the teams out of there. And there were some local teams that were pretty good that would sometimes keep their core together. And so, but what was different is that we didn't have the Nike contract until we started having a formal relationship with them, semi-formal in 96, and the contract. No, I'm sorry. In 95, we had a semi-normal. We started to have a relationship with them, but 96 was when we got the contract, and that began the real big change for us, because it kind of upped the expectations. But in the early years, we would just pick the team, and then we would kind of adjust our schedule accordingly, So if we had a really strong team, we would find a higher level tournaments and put them against the very, very best. And if it was a team that maybe, because we wanted to get them scholarships, so we wanted them to be successful, and you sort of maximize the challenge, but put them in a place where they could be successful, but also challenged, kind of the sweet spot. Right. But we had flexibility to adjust our schedule really from 1995 till 2010 when the EYBL came. Even before that slightly, because we were obligated to go to some tournaments. But when the EYBL came in 2010, that was a game changer for us and for summer basketball in this country. But for those 15 years, from 95 to 2010, we had some flexibility in terms of where we put the kids and where they played somewhat, So we would just have tryouts.
And I know you like being modest, but it was not until like 96 when I got introduced to the Eagles organization as a whole, because like you said, I was playing on like a local team with out of the boys club with Matthew Dickey and Herbert Hoover, and every year was just about keeping our team together. If we decided to play in the summertime, we played in the summertime, or a lot of the guys on my team would go play other sports. I would never forget the time that I got, that I met you. And so you were a big part in just, explaining pretty much the whole overview of just the national scene to me. So can you just talk about that? And as far as just explaining that, because again, we were in the beginning stages. So what was the overview like during that time? You said early 95, 96, as far as making a pitch to a kid.
Yeah. So back then, the real pitch was, if a kid had a dream of playing college basketball and getting their college paid for, that's the only thing we really thought about. We weren't thinking about pros. We'd like to win games. I mean, we'd like to win. The coaches are competitive, and so are the players and the families. Everyone likes to win. I don't care what anyone says. It's about the kids, but people like to win too. Like they like to do both, right? Excuse me. But it really was about, if kids had an aspiration and a gift to play at the next level, we just would offer them. And it was really important to me that we didn't ever denigrate or demean any experiences they had or any local teams, because I think every team has value, and even if kids chose to stay with a local team, we would never disparage that choice. We understood why people did that sometimes, but we would just offer, if you want to play, if you want to expand your horizons a bit and somewhat replicate the college experience for your age, you got to think about a travel team, because when you think about a travel team, in theory, you're going to have 10, 12 of the best players in the age group, in theory, if we did our job right.
Right.
It replicates a college team. A college team is full of good players.
Right.
Even a 12th player in a college team is a pretty good player, right? So you're putting them all together from different parts of the city, and they're learning new roles. So instead of being the best player on their team or one of the 2 or 3 best players on the team, now they're part of 12, and the rotations are different, and the playing time is different, and the role. And it's really getting them to think about and traveling and all of that really does honestly replicate a little bit what happens to them when they go to college and they're competing for playing time against good players. The rotations are different, roles are different. Like you were you were one of Beaumont's best players ever, for example, and you go to Carbondale and that team is loaded up and you had a meaningful role, but your role there was different than it was at Beaumont.
Right.
Beaumont, you're putting up 20, 25 shots a game just so that team could win. But at Carbondale, they weren't asking you to take 25 shots a game, right? In fact, if you did, you might not play.
And I think that's one of the great things about the Eagles program is that you're basically showing everybody what it's like to be at that college level,
right?
From the travel to even the academic parts. Because I would just remember me coming in was a big focus on making sure that I took care of my academics, and you had things set up with Ashley and Scott Gill, making sure that we stayed on top of everything, showing us and talking about what the clearinghouse is, because you'll be surprised the amount of parents or the questions that I get when kids come into high school that have no clue about anything that they need to prepare for. So can you just talk about how that is important, just as putting together the whole overview of a college experience?
It is important. And it's when I talk to student athletes about it, especially if they struggle in school or they may have had a tough freshman, sophomore year, there's a couple of real important lessons. Is that preparing academically for college starts the minute you walk into a high school building, because you have to really have the habits to be successful in college. I mean, there are some bright kids that can turn it off and on for sure. There are a handful, but not most of us are not like that. Most of us have to grind, right? We have to develop habits and make us good students. This doesn't mean we all have to be brilliant, but we have to have habits that we can learn and produce academic work. And that starts at the beginning of freshman year. We often didn't meet the players till the end of their freshman year. When they're 15U, they're finishing up freshman year. Sometimes they've already dug a little bit of a hole for themselves, with a 1.4 GPA or something like that, and it takes a while to dig out of that stuff. And so making sure that they're aware. I think the other thing that happens with really good athletes sometimes is, and even if they're nice guys and they have nice families, they often think things are just going to work out for them because they're a good athlete. And that's somewhat of a fault of our society, which sort of gives them that message. If you're good at a sport, things will probably work out.
Yeah. But
if you're, and that does happen for a small group of athletes. I mean, it does. Let's be honest. There's a small group that are so elite that some things, they kind of do work out for them. Yeah. But for most of us, that's not how it is. You got to grind. You got to produce. And I would often tell student athletes that, you get a lot of accolades when you play. Cheers, your name, you're in the paper, you get trophies, all that kind of stuff. And I would tell this with all sincerity, that you're going to get more pleasure, and that's what I believe anyway, out of becoming an academic qualifier and getting that diploma and finishing academics, because there's no one cheering for you. That's a real accomplishment. That's just a total credit to your hard work and commitment to that process. And you will be so proud of yourself when you are, like I remember I was working with this one guy and I kept telling him that, man, because he was really in the hole after his sophomore year. And he had to dig himself out. And I said, when you qualify, you're going to feel so much better than any shot you've ever hit. And he said, that's so true, man. When he got that qualifying score and got that core GPA up and he was able to go to a 4-year school, he was so happy. And it wasn't any big fanfare. You just got an email that said, hey, you qualified.
Right.
But it was to him, because of the grind and work he put in, that was satisfying. But we had to really get with him early, because you have to constantly let them know where they stand with their core GPA constantly. Yes. But you have to look at the number. You got to look at the data. It's the numbers don't lie. It's pretty. It's no there's no nuance to it. It's not subjective. Right. You got to get that core GPA, and that it's only gotten more difficult from even from when you were coming out. Yeah. So that is a big important part of it, and it's something that we have to remind ourselves of, because clubs often focus on the basketball. We're guilty of that too, because it's easy to get swept up in the competitive part, but we have to always remember that piece.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. So even just so even when, all right, so let's talk about just the process now as a compared to even when just say I grew up as far as the planning store. At what point do you guys start saying, all right, we need to have a meeting to start mapping out to see what our schedule is like? So do you already have tournaments in mind, or as far as planning things out ahead? Because as a coach, as a high school coach, I always circle down the state championship game, and then I work backwards from there as far as planning my season out. So as an elite Nike program, what are like the dates that you say, all right, this is the day I'm going to start getting ready for preparing for the next season?
Well, we meet year round. In fact, we've been meeting every week in the winter. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So really, I'll do be brief about it, but from 1995 to 2010, we had a Nike contract that provided us some access to product and uniforms, and some resources to cover travel. But just to dismiss a myth, it doesn't cover our whole budget. So we still needed to fundraise and et cetera. We did participate in Nike sponsored events, but it was a little bit, I mean, with every passing year, it got more and more organized, Bryan. Like, because it was, first it was just a sponsorship. They just sent us some product and some money to pay for travel. Then it became a contract with obligations. And then it became, you have to be a non-for-profit incorporated, and you have to get audited records. And it got more professional, and all in good ways, all things that helped us be better, being good stewards of our money, accounting for it, having annual audits, background checks on staff, all that kind of stuff. And so as the contract got more robust, our commitment to Nike and that partnership became more clear. But in 2010, it was so different. When they created the EYBL, Nike just wanted to get, and Nike, I mean, I'm biased. I think they're a really great shoe company with regards to youth basketball. They just are always kind of, they're blazing the trail. Like, they created a league and then the other shoe companies followed suit. But they just thought, let's forget having these tournaments, because what problem with tournaments was you'd go pool play, you might play a ton of games, and it just wasn't, the quality wasn't always there, because you're having these young men. Think about it. You play college basketball, you play twice a week. You have these 15-year-olds playing, or 16-year-olds playing 7 games in 3 days. That's insane, right?
Yeah.
Especially at that high level. Like, pros don't do that. So why would you have high school kids do that, right?
Right.
So they created a league so there was predictability about when you play. You would play 4 games in a weekend, not 7. And you knew when you were playing, because it's a league. It's like just a scheduled game. And then at the end, if you qualify for the PJAM, the top 24 went in July, you qualify for the PJAM. And then if you finish out of the running, it was sort of a consolation tournament, also sponsored by Nike. That builds our schedule. That's basically, to answer your question, the EYBL gave us 80% of our schedule every year. The challenge is the league is so competitive. Man, it is so competitive. I remember one year, 19 of the 24 McDonald's All-Americans were in the EYBL. I mean,
right. Yeah.
I watched that. I mean, it's not every year, but that was one year. I'm like, golly. And then, like, you watch this draft wasn't quite like that, but the year before, I'm like, man, those kids were all in the league. Half those kids played in the EYBL. So, so the challenge for us, honestly, is that to be competitive, the hard part for us, or the challenge, is that we can't modify our schedule anymore. Like I said earlier, we would tweak our schedule to kind of fit our talents so the kids could be successful. Now it's like, you're in EYBL. Good luck. You better put together a good team.
Right.
And all the games, every game we play, like, there's no like easing into pool play and, like, kind of working out some kinks and getting some kids in some minutes. It isn't like that. You're playing tough games from the get. And, so the EYBL typically has at least 3, sometimes 4 sessions in the spring, 2 in April, 2 in May, and then the PJAM in July. So that's 5 of our 8 tournaments. We would do maybe a tune-up before the EYBL, and then we maybe do something after the PJAM. And that's the schedule.
Right.
So and they've expanded to include 16 and 15U, kind of a league in a way, but that's more tournament style. But now the 15, 16, 17, basically we build our schedule around the EYBL schedule, and we fill in a couple places. So the scheduling is easier.
Okay.
But it's much more competitive, and they've also pushed us to kind of expand our reach to be more of a regional team with St. Louis as the anchor. But we have had kids come that don't have EYBL teams to come play for us as well.
Right. So as a high school coach, what are some of the things that you may see at the elite level that we may need to work on to maybe get our kids either adapted to maybe be successful at that level, or do you do you have a relationship, or do you want to see some type of relationship with high school coaches and elite coaches to work together to make sure that the student athlete is being worked all year round to be successful at your level?
Well, first of all, I think the high school coaches throughout the region are saints. They're underpaid, they're overworked, and they are really on the front lines of shaping men, young men. I mean, and that's you and everybody else, every single one. We have a lot of respect for the high school coaches. I wish we had more time to develop relationships with them, because I think that they're really important partnerships. Mm-hmm. And I know sometimes there's tension between summer basketball and high school, which I understood it. It bothers me in a way, because I don't think it's necessary. You know, I think that we have many more shared goals than we do differences. And I think that, you know, I think that with summer basketball, sometimes I don't want kids to overvalue it. I think it's apples and oranges. They're both important. I think when they go back to their high school teams, our expectation is that they're leaders on that team and that they make everyone better. And I think that's responsible. And I think college coaches, if I was a college coach recruiting a kid, even if he blew up in the summer, and if he went back to his high school team and was slacking and not a leader, I wouldn't offer him a scholarship. What I expect out of a kid is I want to see him be competitive in the summer. That tells me that he can compete at a national level, so he can play in my Division I program. Check. But when he goes back to his high school team, regardless, I don't care what the team was. Is he making that team better? Is he a leader? All that. That's important too. Is he a good teammate? All that stuff. All of it's important. So if he goes back to the high school team and he's like a jerk, lazy, not working on his game, like I'm not sure if I want that kid. So I think both of them are important.
Right.
And I think the high school coaches do a great job. I think the only thing I would, and this is not really a groundbreaking statement, but I think one of the things, the trends that we see both in EYBL and in college basketball is like, I think this positionless basketball idea where there's more versatility among athletes. And I think that is important. You want all the guys to be able, like Villanova, for example, is good. Like Jay Wright does that. Like he's got 5 guys that can shoot and hit shots, mid-range, whatever, and that. But I also think that, so I think increasing versatility among your players is important. But you know what, Bryan, you developed one of the best point guards we've ever had in Yuri Collins. And I'm telling you, that guy is so special.
Yeah.
And having a true point guard is so, I mean, there's just not many of them, man, even in EYBL. The EYBL is a point guard league. If you got a great point guard, you're going to win games, period.
Wow.
If you don't just with shooters and you can't win with bigs, you've got to have an elite point guard. Yuri Collins was that for us, as was Darius Garland before him. And but Yuri is so unique. And so I even though I talked about versatility, man, if you got a guy like Yuri, or you got a true post player that can put his back to the basket and have some moves, those are so rare. People don't know how to guard that stuff anymore.
Right. Yeah. He reminded me so much of just like an old school type point guard, even in the way he approached the game and did everything. So when we just talk about, just like you said, as far as the way I looked at it, and even, I thought that if you play around elite players in the summertime, that your game is going to be so at an elite level that when you come back to high school, you're gonna dominate the game. And I think that he was able to even show that, because he never missed anything with the Eagles program. He never missed anything with us, and so every year he got better, and it showed that as soon as he came back from playing with you guys, he was just a step faster, a step stronger. Everything was just at an enhanced level once he came back to the high school level. So I think that needs to happen more with guys that play elite level summer basketball. It should transition to where you've been playing with elite talent all summer. You should dominate the high school game, Yep. So let's just talk about setbacks and adversity. Could you say at any point through, your time with the Eagles or Bradley Beal that you felt like you guys went through some type of adversity, and then how did you handle it, and how did you deal with it?
That's a good question. Yeah, I would say yes. I got to think about the adversity. I mean, the adversity always comes from not a losing season so much. This is what I think. The thing that bothers me the most, and so the adversity takes place pretty frequently, is when a player has a bad experience. And if we have 12 players on the team and one of them has a bad experience and quits, that bothers me. It does. It bothers me for the family, all this stuff. And I always try to, and it's probably harder on me than anybody else because I really value the relationship with the families and the kid, and I want them to have a good experience. So when they leave us, that's always two things. It does create some adversity sometimes into your roster, but that's we usually are able to fix that. It's just more about the hit it gives because if someone has a bad experience, it's hard to convince people to come to play because that person had a bad experience in your hometown. One of the interesting things, Bryan, that I've noticed from an adversity standpoint is we've been around for a super long time. And I think that, that's a good thing. It's impressive in a lot of ways, I suppose. But with age, it comes some challenges because, and I joke about it, but I'm also serious about it. We've made mistakes on players. We haven't selected players always correctly. We make mistakes. We're human. We make them. Right. They don't come from a bad place, but we've made mistakes. Right. And I always joke that it's kind of amazing we're still around. How many people we've cut that we shouldn't have cut. Like we should be like folded up shop a while back. Mm-hmm. But I think when you're a local team, there are some advantages to recruiting kids to come play for you, but there are also some challenges because till now we're dealing with with maybe dads and uncles that didn't have a good experience with it. So it's really, I think the diversity for us is always around continuing to nurture and build relationships with an ever evolving basketball community. Like right now I'm looking at you. I remember you as a 15-year-old, but you're kind of a veteran high school coach now. You're not like a new coach. You've been around a little bit. Right. I still see you as a young guy, but when I step back, I'm like, Bryan, he ain't like he's 24. Yeah. He's in his 30s. So late 30s, I want to say, right?
Man, I'm almost 40, man.
That's what I'm saying.
So next year.
Right. So like when you came to play for us, Bird was probably only like in his mid 40s, maybe. So my point is, it's an evolving community. We always have to nurture those relationships, and we have to always be mindful of that and work hard at it, because it's easy to kind of sit back and say, hey, we've been around, we're Nike Club, come play for us. That's not good enough, Right. And I think the adversity we face is when we miss out on a player or a player doesn't have a good experience, and we have to kind of fix that. And I think still the other thing I would say is that Nike has asked us to become more of a regional program with St. Louis as our base, and that makes it difficult to give as many local kids an opportunity to play. And we've also had to make our rosters a bit smaller. Back in the old days, you remember, we would have 13, 14 people rosters often, We would play a lot more games, but it just wasn't fair to the kids. We just recognized that this wasn't fair for them, because in EYBL, trying to give kids meaningful minutes without pool play, without games where you could really have a flexible roster, we just weren't able to do that in a way that was fair to all the players. So we felt we needed to keep that roster size around 10, maybe 11, but 10-ish, So those have been some of the challenges for us in the last, 10 years.
So I'm just thinking about grassroots in general. What are some of the things that like the youth coaches could do to maybe kind of harness a kid? Because like I get it a lot where a kid may come in and think that we're supposed to teach them how to play at the high school level, and just with just the competitiveness that, like you said, summer basketball and all these different training and outlets. What are some of the things that youth coaches could do to maybe, or some advice you can give youth coaches to say, look, you guys need to do this in order for us to know that a kid may be ready for us 15-year or 14U or 15U?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I'll start by saying this, because as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, being a basketball instructor it's not the gift that I bring to the Eagles, but I've also listened a lot and I've watched the trends. Mm-hmm. So one thing I'll remind people is that summer basketball, we have a lot of great minds in our program, that some really gym rats that really know the game well. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, our practices, and you remember this, is primarily designed around team concepts, building chemistry, and developing systems of playing together. It's not, and there is time for skill development and fitness that they have to do on their own or with their high school coach or at school. Summer basketball will never replace the hard work you put in the gym when you get Coach Turner to open up gym and you put up 100 shots. That still has to happen. Right. Think about Brad Beal as an example. He's currently sponsors our club. He's great because yes, he is born with some gifts. Ain't no question. Yeah. But he works super hard. Mm-hmm. Kobe worked hard. Michael Jordan worked hard. I mean, I'm obviously naming the very best. All those great players. Mm-hmm. Very few great players I can't think of anyone that didn't work hard. So and they had to do that with their high school coaches and their teammates and the individual work. the unspectacular work, the hot, sweaty gym work. That still has to happen for all the guys. And for the youth coaches to be able to create those opportunities for them, they don't need a personal trainer, but just to be able to willingness to kind of work with them and get them the extra time to do that is extremely helpful. And I do think that, and then having them go to just kind of expanding the world a bit, like some of the things that you've done around community service and getting your guys to play in like more like play harder teams is helpful for them, because you have to keep them humble, not in a way because they're getting a big head, but you have to make them help them understand and experience that there are players as good or better than them. And so they're like, oh, it keeps them hungry, right? And I think that's the value of summer basketball. And that's also the value of creating a good high school schedule as well, is to challenge your guys. Don't just give them easy games. I remember I talked to youth coaches in the past, they're like, and I'm not disparaging them, they'll be like, hey, I'm 95-4. I'm like, well, okay. I mean, that might be really impressive. I have no idea. But if you're 95-4, I would wonder if you're playing. I mean, I'm sure you've got a good team. But are you challenging? Are you playing up? Are you playing older kids? Are you getting out of town a little bit? Like, I would wonder. I would just ask some of those questions, because that's what you want. That's what you want. You wouldn't want to sacrifice a local tournament where you're steamrolling the same teams 4 times and just go out of town and play some. So those are some of the things I would talk to youth coaches. Challenge your kids. Find guys that'll make them better as they kind of go through the roller coaster development. Always challenge them. You want them to be in that sweet spot where they're not overwhelmed and getting blasted by 40, but they're challenged where they got to compete and see, hey, I got to do some more work here. I got to work on my left hand. I got to hit that mid range, all that stuff, because if you got a kid that can't hit mid range, but he's so much more athletic and get layups the whole game, he'll never work on his mid range, right? He'll just make layups then all of a sudden he gets into college and he can't hit a mid range and he can't play. Yeah. Right.
Because a lot of times people don't like working on the things that they're not good at.
Not good at, right.
Yeah. Because that's going to take a little bit more time, a little bit more patience, a little bit more hard work than just, like you said, just being able to just score at will. Okay, now let's see if you can do some other things going to the left side, pulling up, going to the left, pulling up, going to the right. Some of the things that you might not be good at. So
you know what to do. And the one thing that I was talking to Drew Hanlon, Drew's made a whole career out of training guys.
Right.
And it was interesting. I was talking to him. He said, one of the mistakes that he made early in his training and that some of the pros he works with make is they try to be very good at everything. He goes, he said, you do have to expand your menu and be better, but you don't have to be great at everything, but you want to be good at several things and be really good at that. You want to be good at your mid-range 3-point, all that kind of stuff. So he kind of tweaked his approach, I think, to really help guys be better at more things, but not everything. Cause then you just get incrementally better at a bunch of things as opposed to really good at some stuff. Right.
And then especially at certain levels, it's good to be a specialist in something. So it makes yourself a lot more valuable to where, I know I'm going to get in this type of situation because I have a special skill set that
like in the 3.
And know that I can be put into the game, inserted just to hit a 3, So let's talk about, your social work background and the social emotional part. 2 things when it comes to parents and then when it comes to players. A lot of times, as even as coaches, we get kind of down on ourselves with wins, or with losses, and kind of don't know how to figure things out or dig ourselves out of a hole. What kind of advice can you give for coaches in losing situations? And then also with the emotional part with parents, where they may invest in a lot of time in their child, and then they may not be seeing the benefits of it right now. So how do you balance?
I'll start with the parents, because I spend more time with parents than I do on the coaching end. Because again, I'm not a bench coach. I'll talk a little bit about that. But the parents, it's interesting because we work with parents, when the kids are in high school. So they're a bit of transition. So they come to us as parents of 15U kids, and if they stay in the program, they're parents of 17U kids. And that transition from their middle school basketball experience to high school is different. So the one thing that we try to encourage the parents is to recognize that their student athlete is becoming a young man. And we try to really intentionally model and encourage them to teach their son or the grandson or whoever whatever the guardian role is, to begin to slowly advocate for themselves and to begin to talk to the coaching staff themselves, if possible. I mean, I know there's cases where parents still have to intervene, particularly if a coach is out of line or something like that, or you're just trying to understand how to help your kid, but to really help them, because again, this is a preparation for college. So when you went to Carbondale, you played for Chris Lowry, right?
Yeah. So Coach Larry was there my first year, right? Mm-hmm.
You don't want to get a call from your mom about your playing time.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, he would take it, and your mom's a great person, and she would never do that, by the way. Right. But she would just tell you to work harder. But yeah, she would. But my point is, like, so what we're teaching, we want to teach the kids who begin, developmentally appropriate, begin to advocate for themselves as they get older, because when the expectation when they go to college, and the college coaches will definitely talk to parents and handlers, but they prefer to talk with the player, the student athlete themselves.
Right, yeah.
And so we try to begin to talk with parents about that. I think the key to doing that effectively is to keep talking to them about that on a regular basis. And the really most important time to talk about it is when they're not mad, because it's hard to give that advice when they're emotional or they're upset, Mm-hmm. But if you predict that they're going to get upset, and I don't mean it, I mean, you go, there's going to be times you're going to be upset with this. That you just tell them, you're going to be upset with it. It's going to happen. We're going to play 40 games. There's going to be a time you might be upset with it, or your son might be upset. That's going to happen. You predict it. When you predict it, it takes some of the sting down, takes the temperature down a little bit. They're like, oh, they told me this was going to happen. Right. And then you map out a possible pathway to do that. Don't contact us, because no one does their best. If the coach has been a volunteer coach has been on the road for 72 hours, it's Sunday night. You're getting ready to go in a van, drive 7 hours. It's not the time for you to be yelling at him about your kid's playing time. If no one's going to win that, that's going to be a unproductive conversation. Take a deep breath. Remember this game. No one's going to remember what happened in Milwaukee in 2014. Nobody. It's going to have no impact on your son's life. It really won't. This is part of his journey. So remember that, put it in perspective, give 24 to 48, then reach out. Or talk with your son about how you guys can reach out together, or have your son reach out. So those kind of things, predicting is going to happen, acknowledging that we're going to make mistakes. They're going to be upset with us, building in time, helping them with perspective, and then helping them identify ways to and they know their kids. We don't know their kids as well as they do. So I don't want to pretend to say this is the only way that can happen, but help build agency for your son to be able to advocate for themselves, because that's where you want that kid to be when he goes away to college in 4 years,
Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, it's just that maturations of just growing up. A lot of times is setting realistic goals for yourself, and then it's about that relationship. I think, like, if I didn't have those realistic type of conversations with a Coach Gray or a Coach Gold at a 15 or the 16, I wouldn't appreciate those conversations now when I become older. And I think, a lot of times one thing that you said that was great is that, talk to them when they're not upset and they're not mad, because they'll remember, it's cool heads will prevail in that situation, and I think that's a real good jewel to have for any coach that's listening, is that a lot of times you may have to have those difficult conversations with a parent when the parents are not upset and mad, to just to reinforce, hey, it's going to be times like this. Mm-hmm. And then also, we want to be able to talk to the child or the student for him to advocate for himself, because in the end, this is be something that he wants to do, and not something that you're forcing on them, Right.
That's 100% sure. You're right, Bryan. The other thing we talk to parents about, and we predicted for them before they see it, so they're not having to they still struggle with it. But the two things we talk about is that, especially when they come into 15U experience, that their son's role in the team may change from what they experienced as an 8th grader. Their minutes might change. But we talk about that. And again, that's not a cop-out, but we try to talk about that in the context of two things. That's often what's going to happen in a lot of collegiate experiences. There are some colleges that have short rotations. Mm-hmm. Jordan Goodwin plays about 30 minutes a game. That does happen, right? But but we just talk about the fact that, but even in that case, we'll tell them, but colleges play twice a week, so they can have an 8-man rotation. They can do that because they got time to recover. But we're going on the road. We're playing 5-6 games. So we have to have different rotations. The minutes are going to be different. The number of shots that your son may take may be different than what you are used to seeing. Do we predict that for them? We assure them that that's okay, because, and we've talked a lot to college coaches about this. When college coaches go to summer games, they know it's different. When the college coach goes to a high school game, so when they went to see Yuri play, mm-hmm. the coach's expectations that Yuri's going to be on the floor almost the whole game unless he's in foul trouble, unless you're blowing him out. He's going to play. So if he's only playing like 16 minutes for no good reason, they're going to be like, man, what's going on with that, right?
Yeah.
But when they go see him play in the summer, mm-hmm. their expectation about his minutes is different, because they know he's on an elite team, mm-hmm. that with high-level athletes. They're not expecting them to play like I think that our games were 32 minutes, so they weren't expecting them to play 30 minutes. They're expecting them to maybe play 20, 18, 20, 22 maybe. So their expectations about minutes, roles, because they know we're playing multiple games in a short period of time. And the college coaches know that. They don't track wins and losses. They don't track minutes. What they do track is, does your son make his team better, both on the floor and off the floor? They're watching him in the game. Does he make his team better? I mean, I know he can hit shots. That's cool. Okay. Can he guard? Is he diving for a loose ball? Is he cheering on his teammates? When he comes out of the game, what does he do? When he goes in the game, what does he do? They look at all that, because I can't tell you how many coaches I've called, and I'm always interested to see if we won. And they'll say, "Oh, I love your guy, this and that." I go, "Did we win?" He goes, "Oh, I have no idea. I don't know. Yeah. I think so." Like, they're not paying attention to that. Yeah, I want to know if we beat Baltimore Elite. They're like, "I don't know, man. I couldn't tell you."
And that's interesting that you say that, because again, it's assuring, or explaining to parents that colleges are looking at that, just a small sample size of what they know that they can get. If they have a kid that's an elite player that we're able to spend all of this time with and invest the best of the best in them, then they know that they're gonna get a good product, a good person out of that. But it's just that small sample size that they're looking for in summer ball, and it should be, why is my son not playing the whole game in the summertime?
Well, and what's really interesting, this has changed, is that so when college coaches come to EYBL games, when they're certified events, if it's a high major blue chip school like Duke or something like that, and they're recruiting a high level athlete like a Jason Tatum who went to Duke, I mean, there's an expectation he's going to play a pretty good chunk of minutes.
Right.
But if you're a mid-major school and you're an EYBL, you recognize that your mid-major guy may not be the very best player in the EYBL team, but he might be 5, 6, 7. It can still be really good for you. And so your expectation about how many minutes he's getting is maybe a little different, right? But you're just looking at, can he play at my Ohio Valley Conference school, which is a great conference, by the way, that kind of stuff. So I think that there's some variance with that, so, but it's hard for parents. I mean, we just have to help parents understand that, and it's been an adjustment for us too, so that's the toughest part, I think, both in terms of helping them and also to begin to separate, because they've often coached their kids, begin to separate and allow their son to individuate a bit and create some space for himself. Like, your mom was great at that, man. Like, like as long as she trusted Bird and trusted us, she was like, "Hey," I don't think she even traveled with us. She would just let you go.
And that was one of the, and I was fortunate enough, being the first, I would say generation athlete, the first one in my family that, went through these steps of going to college and being recruited. And so everything was just all new to her. So like you said, as long as she knew that I wouldn't get in any trouble and that I was around people that she could trust, if I loved it, then she loved it.
She's like, I've already had Bryan on the road with some responsible adults and some friends and Redder and hanging out on Lexington Avenue all weekend. Just get them on the road.
And doing who knows what.
Who knows what at the 4,000 block of Lexington.
Right. So even let's just talk about, and we can finish up with just, I want you to speak to just the for one, the character aspect of the Bradley Beal Elite, the Eagles organization, and the volunteer work that you guys do in building character. Because even my experience is that, you was one of the people that have always, for the last, you can kind of speak on this, to do like the Elite 100 and do the volunteer work with camps, with whatever, Nike organization or Nike tournament that they may have, you will volunteer to do something like this. So kind of speak to the importance of doing volunteer work, and then for people to see that you guys are doing it.
Great question. So a couple of things. So we don't have paid staff. And so that's a good model for our young men that are in the program. And we have to, like a lot of times when I've worked with student athletes in the past with the club, they'll be really humble and thankful. And I always appreciate that too. But I always say, listen, first of all, I love doing this. So I'm very happy doing this volunteer work. But just, you don't owe me anything. Just when you're in a position to help people, just pay it forward, right? We clearly articulate that. Like, some people helped us out when we were young. We're doing the same, and you will all. And I always tell, because I know that you'll be doing this. You'll be helping out the community in some kind of way. It doesn't have to be basketball.
Right.
So, but we model it. We don't take a paycheck. We model it. And I think that, our challenge as the coaches and the volunteers is to make sure, and this is the same with the parents, is that it's not about us. It's about them. And you know what, Bryan, you're one of the exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of our coaches, they're great guys, but they're super competitive. You are too.
Right.
But there's a lot of, a lot of alpha males in the basketball coaching community, right?
Right.
So we laugh about that. It's hard to have 4 head coaches on the bench because most of them are used to being in charge.
Yeah.
But they joke about it, but they always recognize that this experience is for the players and their families. It's not for us. And any accolades or any successes or any scholarships is for us to celebrate on behalf of them. And we have to remind ourselves of that. When we win games, we win as a team, it's because of the players on the floor. And we have an important part as a teammate because we're coaches and put them in a position to be successful, but it's really about them. And we have to really remind ourselves about that and articulate to the kids. So we have to, the most important thing we do is not give those halftime speeches because kids are tired. You know how it is, man.
Yeah.
You be respectful. They're like, I'm just tired. But you have to model it like when the kids are eating, when you're traveling, you have to model the work and the volunteer. And when they recognize that this coach crawled in a van at Enterprise Leasing on Friday at 9 a.m., drove 7 hours to Milwaukee, stayed with me, made sure I ate, went to bed on time, and drove me back and got it back at 1 a.m. and did it for no money.
Right.
That's great role modeling. And that's the best thing we can do for kids.
Yeah.
And then treat them respectfully and just hopefully set a foundation and example for them to do the same. That's really the best characters. And we do some community service stuff too, but I think the most valuable thing we do in terms of the character is really how we treat them. And we're not always perfect, and what we model for them. That's the best thing we do for kids, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, man, that's gold right there, Vince, man. I appreciate you, man. Cause like I said, if it wasn't for you introducing yourself to my mom, I don't even think that I would be able to say that I had the experience that I have, growing up, my teenage years were some of the best years. I wouldn't change it for anything. And I don't think, if I never went through this experience, that I'd be sitting here today saying that, I'm coaching and I'm giving back and teaching the game that I love. I would have probably stopped playing a long time ago, and who knows what I'll be doing, but it was people like you and Coach Gray that put that battery in my back to have me keep going and keep progressing.
I miss Coach Gray. He founded the club. He was such a visionary. What a good man. Really was. It's funny because
I appreciate Coach Gray, and I'll tell you a quick story. So Coach Gray actually coached. So the last year at Beaumont, he was my assistant coach, and that was I think one of the greatest moments for me, because here I am, I had my summer youth coach being next to me as like the sage veteran, helping me out and just being that security blanket to just say, you know what, you one of mine. I'm going to make sure that you have some type of success, and, I'll volunteer this year. And the funny part is that he was the head coach the night my son was born. And so I had to go to the hospital to help my wife out to give birth to my son. And he coached the team to a victory that night. So that's something that I always remember. And, I miss that guy too, man. It's just, he's done so much for this community. And a lot of folks don't know so many hats that he wore around St. Louis that is like a who's who of, if you read his bio, you'll be like, man, I didn't know Coach Gray did this or Coach Gray did that. And he lived his life to the fullest.
He was incredible. And both the guys are proud Beaumont Blue Jacket grads, man.
Yeah. So, all right. So.